Hello. COVID-19 has been devastating to all of us, socially and economically. So this broadcast is about some of the silver linings, some of the opportunities I think it offers us, especially people in market systems development. Hello and welcome to Dev TV. Dev TV, where we profile ideas, innovations, and individuals doing amazing things in economic development. So today's broadcast really is about Corona, sorry, COVID-19, and the opportunities that I think it offers us as economic development professionals. Our primary effort has always been to eradicate poverty, to reduce inequality, and to effectively make income or economic growth a lot more inclusive than it's been. So that's our primary objective. So with this incredible shock that's happened to the world, this COVID-19, there are some opportunities that I think it offers us as economic development, especially because our focus is more on behavioral change. We have we have adopted tools, we have adopted innovations, and people have come up with creative solutions to getting people to behave differently. So growth in an economy can be a lot more inclusive, so we can have a reduction in inequality. So what I thought I'll do is to do a quick presentation of some of the opportunities that I think exist within economic development projects, especially market systems development projects, because of um, COVID-19 and the way we've been responding to it. So what I thought I'll do is show you a quick mind map of my thoughts. So here, what are the causes of this opportunity then? As far as I see it, is the policy responses, and that's why the opportunities will vary depending on the location that the project is in and the context of the project. But generally, I think the responses, especially the social isolation, the social distancing, and the shutdown of most commercial activities actually present some opportunities in the way we do business. And when I say in the way we do business, I mean the way economic development is implemented. Um, so people are calling this new normal. And this is a phrase to describe exactly what has happened to the world, that the world will not go back to the way we used to do things, the way we used to commercially interact, the way we used to conduct ourselves, even at a social level. So that's what that is. And but before I talk about the opportunity, what I thought I ought to do is to tell you what market systems really is about. Our primary ambition is to inspire inclusive economic growth, as I'd mentioned earlier. And this inclusive growth generally will come from um, private sector beneficiaries, governments behaving differently. The reason we feel that economic development is not inclusive at the moment is because uh, all of these actors do not uh, deliver their responsibilities and duties in a way that it's inclusive. So our focus is economic growth, and our focus is in behavioral change. And as far as our methods are concerned, to achieve this behavioral change, um, what we do essentially is that we examine the root causes of this behavioral ineffectiveness or inefficiency or constraint to growth, especially where the poor do business. And we then incentivize the private sector and even the beneficiaries, the people that were really trying to lift out of poverty. So what we generally do is incentivize them to behave differently. And some of the things that we also do is to demonstrate the benefits of this behavioral change we're trying to inspire when we do when we do interventions in market systems. Now, some of the things that's developed over the recent years is that this behavioral change have triggers, and I've explained this more in my intervention design canvas that I presented on this channel several weeks ago. So some of the issues: social influence, that causes behavioral change; regulatory influence, that causes behavioral change. And the other bit is the shock, and this is what we're going through at the moment. It's the shock to the system really generally inspires, or at least leads to, some level of behavioral change. Now, the opportunities. So I am speaking here mostly about project design and how market systems projects react to these issues. And in my view, we have an opportunity in market systems design to begin to think a bit more about some of the way we design these projects and what the implication of those designs are. And we may have to include some other things to that ordinarily we don't consider part of the market system. In a video that I broadcasted, I think a couple of days ago or last week, we're talking about, and Rob Hitchins mentioned the unknowns. So how do we design economic development projects to make our beneficiaries and private sector partners a bit more resilient? Resilient not only to spot potential issues or shock and stresses, not only to respond to those shock and stresses, and not only to recover from those shock and stresses, because there are some shock and stresses that are known, and we know we know those, and so we can do something about those things. But then the question then is, how do we prepare for the unknown? So those shock and stresses that we do not know, and the implication of which we don't know. So what do we do to address those issues? So that's why I thought this is now effectively move market system development to begin to consider very seriously how we can account for the unknowns. So approaches that we adopt then in order to get behavioral change, or perhaps what the opportunities are for projects. So projects now need to begin to really seriously think about business models. So rather than create an innovation, create an intervention with an idea that really does not take into account the business model of the partner or the business model of the beneficiaries, it is now very important to actually use business models to lead the way we design projects and the way we design interventions. I've spoken about this when I was talking about the entrepreneurial economic development approach. And when I introduced the intervention design canvas, the emphasis of all of those was to really push for how we can begin to use commercial innovations, commercial ideas, to design projects and intervention that comes out of those projects. So that's essentially what I think is happening now. For MSD projects as well, we're now beginning to use the word pivot in some of our discussions when we talk about COVID-19. So the pivoting here, though, essentially we talk more about our private partners pivoting their businesses so they can deal with and recover from this shock to the economic activities or to their businesses. We in MSD projects, we now have to adopt that same approach, that same strategy of really incorporating our context, our condition, and then pivoting to make sure that we are relevant, not only to our beneficiaries, but to our partners as well. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that has come out of all of this is data-driven decisions. So very often we rely on the monitoring and evaluation team to present data to us to guide the logic of our intervention. What I think needs to happen now is that the implementers, people that are implementing this project, need to not only work very closely with the monitoring and evaluation team, but now they need to have the same sort of skills so they can continuously use data to guide the way they implement their logic and how the logic really is moving towards the primary objective of whatever the impact level is. So we really need to now begin to think in terms of data-driven decisions. Now, the other thing I thought is an implication for market systems development is the skill of our practitioners. The skill now needs to move away from the typical development type approach to things. We now need to really bring in business people. We need to think like a business. So that's why it's important for the project itself to be able to pivot. And to be able to pivot, it means that we need to engage with our donors to say, now, this is the value proposition that we have, but potentially depending on the market condition, depend on how market moves, because the market is very dynamic. We really need to begin to think of possibility of pivoting away from where our operation is, where our strategy is at the moment, and pivot away from it to be a bit more effective and a bit more relevant. So the skills that we need now need to be more business skills than it is development skills. Tools then, the tools that we, intervention design canvas, I've explained that on here on this channel. We're creating an electronic version that will be presented to people so people can begin to use this and make comment and maybe refine the intervention design canvas and make it a lot more effective. It's a business tool. It focuses on the business models. It focuses on behavioral change triggers. It focuses on real commercial approach to intervention, to what we do in economic development. The other thing that I think is important for us to begin to think about, especially as economic development professionals, is that we now need to introduce the use of technology. We preach this to our partners and we preach this to our beneficiaries, but we are not particularly very good at using some of the technologies that we present to our partners. And I think it is now time for us to begin to do that. Software as a service tools are plenty. And we in market system development have pushed this to a lot of people to make sure that they use these tools to make their business better and to achieve greater income and inclusive growth. So we as MSD professionals now need to begin to think in terms of how we can make use of the same things that we are suggesting that our beneficiaries and partners do. So intervention design then, this has changed the way intervention, or the fact that we've been restricted, we've been kept at home, has changed the way we think about interventions. And I really think that there is no need to abandon some of the interventions that we've already started, some of the interventions that we think is working well. But now the shock has come and it has maybe derailed the intervention. Rather than abandon the intervention and just think that it's not working, what I suggest is that we do a particular examination and really revise and refine the intervention, because it will not be the whole intervention that would not make sense anymore. I mean, maybe in some cases it would be so, but in most cases it would be certain aspect of the intervention that would have been hit really hard. And we now need to really bring these business tools to look at this area of the intervention that's been hit and begin to refine it and see how we can make it slightly more relevant to the situation. So, as usual, inclusiveness is our primary objective. Resilience, though, resilience has always been the known shocks. We prepare our partners and beneficiaries to known shocks. How about the unknown unknowns? Now, how do we then really begin to make this happen? How do we begin to design interventions, projects to be flexible and fluid and responsive to this sort of situation? So this is one of the issues that we really now need to consider. As always, our intervention design must continue to be systemic. So what's my key message then? My key message really for this presentation is to say, number one, I can't spell. Number one, revise rather than abandon current interventions. Most of us have spent a lot of time designing really good interventions. And because of this shock, the general tendency is to think that this is not working, so we must abandon it. And my suggestion is that we really ought to think very carefully, look at the aspect of the intervention that may not be applicable because of the current situation. And don't forget, we are going to get over this, and things are definitely going to change. So think about how we can revise the intervention logic to reflect that we have a temporary situation and there's a post-COVID-19 situation, and how we need to respond to that as a project, and how our partners need to respond to it, and how our beneficiaries should respond to it. Opportunities. In my view, this has created new supporting functions for some of the intervention areas that we work in. Channels to reach customer has changed, and people are a lot more responsive to new channels. People are adopting different behavioral pattern, different procurement pattern, or consumption pattern. So we really need to investigate these new patterns and begin to respond and create interventions to reflect this new way of doing things. So rather than abandon your intervention, consider whether or not this has created an opportunity to create new supporting functions that will be a source of employment and income for some of the beneficiaries. Widening the scope of current supporting function. Yes, indeed. So in some cases, you may not need to create a new supporting function. It might actually be that some of the supporting functions that you currently work with would now have to expand the scope of their services and the function that they perform. I think this is worth really focusing on and really using some of the tools that we have in economic development and some that we have in business to really begin to think in terms of how we can expand the scope or create new supportive functions. Please investigate supporting functions, because in most of the projects I've been talking to, it has presented new opportunities. Although it has been devastating for some people, but it has presented new opportunities. People have pivoted from a particular type of business to another type of business in response, and they're doing particularly well in various projects. Some of that I may talk about later. Regulatory influence. We now can influence regulators. Regulators will likely listen to us a bit more because they have a bit more time in their hand as they work from home, and we can begin to really talk to the decision makers and hopefully get some traction in convincing government rules how really to move forward and adjust to the current situation. Change in business model. Absolutely. Things have changed. As I mentioned earlier, there are some businesses, there are some sector that will not operate in the same way. There are some sector that now will really focus on a different delivery channel that will really help propel their business. It can be that they will continue to do, they continue to use their original channel, but now because of the situation, they're forced into creating a different channel, especially one that uses technology. And because of that, they now can reach a whole lot more people. Training, for instance, training providers generally have to use physical premises, but now people are delivering training through different mediums of the internet, WhatsApp, social communication tools like Skype, Zoom, and all of these tools are now being used effectively to deliver trainings. And recorded videos, that's a snippet that's sent to beneficiaries, especially at the farm level, are now being used, and it's really creating a different type of behavior from the partner, from the beneficiaries, and the project. So this is an opportunity for us to now begin to investigate other type of response or other type of delivery channels to some of the interventions that we do, and pivot. I mentioned this earlier. We need to focus on how we can get some of our partners and beneficiaries to think about other areas of implementing other areas of commercial enterprise. So this is what I have. This is the these are the opportunities I see, and I think especially when we focus on the new supporting functions and creating or widening the scope of current supporting functions, I think this is a really good opportunity for us to influence our partners, to influence our beneficiaries. It is critical that we do not just throw our hands up in the air and reverse some of the gains that we've made in implementing some of those really good market systems design or market system interventions. It's important that we don't reverse the gain we've made and just really focus on how we can refine it and adapt it to the current situation. So this is my thought, and this is my idea of the opportunities that COVID-19 has presented market systems development. My heart continues to go out to those incredible medical professionals working in the hospitals, working in humanitarian setting, those frontline workers. Thank you all, and keep safe, and hopefully all of this will pass fairly soon, and things will hopefully get better for all of us. So thank you for watching. As always, comments and observations in the sections below. Thank you.